According to the 2020 National Electrical Code, specifically Section 250.119 at WOC, the re-identification of equipment grounding conductors is addressed. This section details how an uninsulated or insulated equipment grounding conductor must be re-identified when used to connect equipment to the grounding bus bar or terminal in a distribution panel board, or to the grounding terminal of a code-connected appliance. The purpose of this re-identification is to clearly indicate the conductor's function as an equipment grounding conductor, ensuring safety and proper electrical system operation. The NEC outlines specific methods for re-identifying equipment grounding conductors. Firstly, a green insulating sleeve can be used at each end of the conductor. This provides a clear visual indication that the conductor is an equipment grounding conductor. Secondly, tape or paint with 3 continuous stripes of green insulation grade tape or paint can be applied. Tape markings are permitted to be in the form of a spiral or other equivalent marking. This method allows for flexibility in how the green marking is applied, as long as it is clear and continuous. An exception exists for situations where identification is impractical. This includes locations such as inside splice enclosures, at motor terminals, and within sections of cable assemblies where the conductors are tightly bundled and are not accessible. In these cases, the marking may be omitted. However, even in these situations, the markings must be applied within 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the point where the conductor leaves the enclosure, splice, or cable assembly. This ensures that the conductor is identified as an equipment grounding conductor as it enters or exits these inaccessible locations. Applying tape only to the last 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the wire at the point where it terminates is compliant with the NEC. This is because the exception allows for marking to be applied within 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the termination point when identification along the entire length is impractical. This approach simplifies the installation process while still ensuring that the equipment grounding conductor is properly identified at its termination point. In summary, the NEC 250.119 at WOC provides specific guidelines for re-identifying equipment grounding conductors. These guidelines allow for flexibility in the method of re-identification while also ensuring that the conductor is clearly identified as an equipment grounding conductor. The exception to the rule allows for marking to be applied within 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the termination point when identification along the entire length is impractical, which simplifies the installation process. The National Electrical Code, or NEC, provides comprehensive standards for electrical wiring and safety. Understanding and adhering to these standards is crucial for ensuring the safe and reliable operation of electrical systems. One of the key aspects of electrical safety is proper grounding, which involves creating a low impedance path for fault currents to return to the source. This helps to prevent electrical shock hazards and equipment damage. The equipment grounding conductor, or EG, plays a vital role in the grounding system. It provides a path for fault currents to flow back to the source, allowing overcurrent protective devices, such as circuit breakers or fuses, to trip and energize the circuit. This helps to prevent electrical shock hazards and equipment damage. The NEC specifies requirements for the size, installation, and identification of equipment grounding conductors. These requirements are designed to ensure that the EGC is capable of safely carrying fault currents and that it is easily identifiable as a grounding conductor. Section 250.119 of the NEC addresses the identification of equipment grounding conductors. It states that equipment grounding conductors must be identified by one of the following means: firstly, by being bare; secondly, by being covered with a continuous green color; or thirdly, by being covered with a continuous green color with 1 or more yellow stripes. This helps to distinguish equipment grounding conductors from other conductors in the system, such as phase conductors or neutral conductors. In some cases, it may be necessary to re-identify an equipment grounding conductor. This is typically done when a conductor that is not originally identified as an equipment grounding conductor is used for that purpose. For example, a conductor that was originally used as a phase conductor may be repurposed as an equipment grounding conductor. In such cases, the conductor must be re-identified to indicate its new function. Section 250.119 what provides specific requirements for re-identifying equipment grounding conductors. It states that where an uninsulated or insulated equipment grounding conductor is used to connect equipment to the grounding bus bar or terminal in the distribution panel board, or to the grounding terminal of a cord-connected appliance, the conductor must be re-identified by one of the following methods. Firstly, a green insulating sleeve at each end of the conductor, or secondly, tape or paint with 3 continuous stripes of green insulation grade tape or paint, except that the tape markings are permitted to be in the form of a spiral or other equivalent marking. This ensures that the re-identified conductor is clearly identifiable as an equipment grounding conductor. An exception to this rule exists where identification is impractical at locations such as inside splice enclosures, at motor terminals, and within sections of cable assemblies where the conductors are tightly bundled and are not accessible. In these cases, the marking may be omitted. However, the markings must be applied within 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the point where the conductor leaves the enclosure, splice, or cable assembly. This exception recognizes that it may not always be possible to identify the entire length of an equipment grounding conductor, especially in confined spaces. However, it still requires that the conductor be identified as an equipment grounding conductor as it enters or exits these inaccessible locations. In the situation you described, you are using a number 40 HHM black color insulated conductor for the equipment grounding or bonding conductor. You are asking whether you need to tape the wire green along its entire length from where it leaves the conduit to the grounding bus, or whether you can just tape the last 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the wire at the point where it terminates. Based on the 2020 NEC, you only need to tape the last 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the wire at the point where it terminates. This is because the exception to section 250.119 ATWOC allows for marking to be applied within 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the termination point when identification along the entire length is impractical. In your case, it is likely that identifying the entire length of the conductor would be impractical, as it would require taping the wire along its entire run from the conduit to the grounding bus. Therefore, you can simply tape the last 3 inches or 76 millimeters of the wire at the point where it terminates. This will satisfy the requirements of the NEC and ensure that the conductor is properly identified as an equipment grounding conductor. It is important to note that the tape used for re-identification must be green insulation grade tape. This type of tape is specifically designed for electrical applications and is resistant to moisture, chemicals, and abrasion. It is also important to ensure that the tape is applied properly, so that it provides a continuous and secure covering over the conductor. In addition to the requirements for re-identification, the NEC also specifies requirements for the size and installation of equipment grounding conductors. These requirements are designed to ensure that the EGC is capable of safely carrying fault currents and that it is properly connected to the grounding system. It is important to consult the NEC for specific requirements related to the size and installation of equipment grounding conductors in your application. By following the requirements of the NEC, you can ensure the safe and reliable operation of your electrical system. Proper grounding is essential for preventing electrical shock hazards and equipment damage, and the equipment grounding conductor plays a vital role in the grounding system. By properly identifying and installing equipment grounding conductors, you can help to create a safe and reliable electrical environment. The NEC is a comprehensive document, and it is important to consult the latest edition for the most up-to-date requirements. The NEC is updated every 3 years, so it is important to stay current with the latest changes. In addition to the NEC, there may be local codes or regulations that apply to electrical installations in your area. It is important to check with your local authorities to ensure that you are complying with all applicable codes and regulations. Electrical work should only be performed by qualified and licensed electricians. Electrical work can be dangerous, and it is important to have the proper training and experience to perform the work safely. If you are not a qualified electrician, you should not attempt to perform electrical work yourself. Always consult with a qualified electrician for any electrical work that needs to be done. They will be able to ensure that the work is done safely and in accordance with all applicable codes and regulations. Remember that electrical safety is everyone's responsibility. By following the requirements of the NEC and taking appropriate safety precautions, you can help to prevent electrical shock hazards and equipment damage.